And we're live. And this is Ed Parcaut, your host of Real Estate Jerky, which is the extension of the radio show that we do on the weekends. And today we have Sheriff Jeff Dirkse, and he was on last week, and we talked about a bunch of stuff in Stanislaus County. I thought he could come on, tell us a little bit more, because a lot of people don't realize when you're on radio, you only get about 18 minutes to talk. And if we're asking questions, you only have maybe 15 minutes to tell your whole story. And I don't know if everybody knows who really the sheriff is and his background. First of all, I want to say thank you for coming on today.
No, thanks for having me, Ed. I appreciate it. Happy to do it.
Yeah. I mean, for myself, I'm a vet. Yeah. I knew about your military background, but I don't think a lot of people do. And I think it's important for me anyway, for vets. I do another show called Helping the Brave, and it's all about helping vets transition out of the military because they have a lot of skills that other people don't know they have and how to translate those into real life. You want to kind of talk about your background, and then we'll get into what you're doing for the sheriff department.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. It is interesting because veterans they have a lot of skills, and they're not just shooting or blowing things up or, driving tactical vehicles or something like that. There's a lot of skills that come with it, with discipline, organizational awareness, and, quite frankly, in some levels, the bureaucracy and how to make things work. So I grew up here in Stanislaus County. My family's in ag. We had a dairy. They now have ag and dairy and almonds. But I always was interested in the military. So when I graduated from Turlock High, I went to West Point, United States Military Academy, and spent 4 years there. Arguably, actually, I don't think it's arguable, but I would say it's the best leadership school in the world. But I'm sure that a few other places would debate that.
Yeah, like Navy. Anyway.
Yeah, no, we don't say that name. I know, hey. I know. I know it. Right. The two schools my kids were not allowed to go to, Navy and Berkeley.
I can see Berkeley, but that's pushing it.
Well, my nephew's a Naval Academy grad, so it's a good rivalry. But
just so you know, my son's airborne Army in Anchorage.
See, he saw the light.
So. I wouldn't let him go in the Navy because as a medic, you will be on a ship. There's no question, ands if buts about it. You will get on a ship. I'm like, you don't want to do that. I was lucky I didn't get on a ship, but that's enough about me. Let's go back to you.
Yeah. So. Well, the interesting story on that, I have a brother who's a commercial fisherman. Now, I'd always intended to go to the Naval Academy and be a SEAL. And then in high school, I worked for him for a summer and got off the boat at the end of the summer. I said, I'll never work on a boat again as long as I live. So changed, went to West Point. But when I graduated from West Point, I served in the 101st Airborne Division as an infantry platoon leader, and then in the 2nd Ranger Battalion, part of the 75th Ranger Regiment, as a rifle platoon leader there, and then ultimately as a special projects officer. Went to a couple more schools, got off of active duty, and came back, and I ran my family's ag operation, the almonds and some of the row crop. I didn't do anything with the dairy. After 9/11, ended up back in the military in the California National Guard at that time. Went to Iraq as an infantry company commander in 2005. And when I left Iraq, that's when I got interested in law enforcement. So a lot of my soldiers had been in law enforcement, and they really encouraged me to look at that as a profession. Came back, did one ride along here at the sheriff's office, and went home, told my wife I found my new profession. And so it's just been it's been a great fit for me because I'm very driven by, I need a service and a sense of purpose. And both of those I find here in this profession. And, but kind of back to your original point about, vets and so on, in law enforcement, we are a paramilitary structure, right? So we don't necessarily use the same titles, right? There's no sheriff in the military.
Right.
But we have captains and lieutenants and sergeants, and it's a chain of command. So, understanding a lot of the processes that are out there in the military, I think has been greatly advantageous for everything that we've been able to accomplish here at the sheriff's office in the last 2.5 years that I've been the sheriff. It's just been, the military was an excellent primer for all of that. And even now, we try to hire vets as much as we can because they understand discipline, they understand processes, they understand how to get things done.
Yeah, one of the questions I asked every vet, I said, what do you still use to this day that you learned in the military? And I have to say, 75% says on time is 10 minutes early.
Yep, absolutely. And, just show up at the right place at the right time with the right equipment and do what you're supposed to do. Give 110% and all of that. And so it's a great skill set. And it is in many ways lacking in a lot of our workforce, not necessarily here at the sheriff's office, but just when you look at folks out across the country, you hear that complaint a lot from employers.
Right. And I think a lot of, and I don't want to keep bringing up vets, but a lot of vets will work with, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat, vets will figure a way to work together. They've had to, they don't have a choice. They don't care what color your skin is, where you come from. They don't care. It's you work together, you get a job done. That's what you're there for. And that's, I think. And so it's not just about them, it's about the job. And so
absolutely. And you're even right on the nonpartisan thing. The military has historically always been nonpartisan or even kind of apolitical for years, decades. Military officers specifically were truly apolitical, literally didn't even vote.
Right. And you're not supposed to say anything bad about the current president, who, whenever you were in, no matter whether you agree with him or not.
Yep.
Now, if we could just go back to that.
Right.
Let's move on. I could be here for days. So with that background, sheriff's department, you probably didn't go in going, hey, I want to be the sheriff.
I did not. It was actually interesting because when I became a deputy, my prior job had been a company commander in combat for a year with 120 guys that worked directly for me. And when I went to the police academy, I thought, man, this is really nice. The only person I'm in charge of is me. It's just so easy. And enjoyed being a deputy. And I actually had another mobilization to Germany, where I worked for Special Operations Command Europe from 2010 through 2012. And when I was there, was the same time the sheriff's department was going through the RIFs, the reduction in force due to the economy. And I actually got RIFed. I think I was the last deputy RIFed, but I knew it was coming. So I took this mobilization. They had asked a couple of times, and I finally said yes. Kind of with the intent of, if I left, since the department wouldn't have to pay me, then hopefully somebody else could keep their job, right? Kind of in lieu of me. And I did get riffed in there for about 3 months while I was gone. But the point to this is that while I was there, I actually contemplated staying or returning to active duty and finishing my military career. But through conversations with my wife, ultimately decided, no, I'm going to go back to the sheriff's office and I'm going to seek to promote. Just because, I was a deputy at the time. When I got mobilized, I'd been the ag crimes detective. And I just realized that with a lot of the experience and the leadership training that I had, I really felt that I could do more for the department. So when I got back, promoted to sergeant, ultimately to lieutenant. And then when Adam announced his retirement, I ran for sheriff. And I've been the sheriff now for I guess it's about 2 years and 7 months.
2 years. Wow. It's been that long already. I was actually surprised that it was coming up for another election coming up.
I know. COVID seemed like a decade, but.
So since you brought that up, you had a lot of challenges during COVID. How did that affect the sheriff's department, and what did you do differently?
Oh yeah, it was an incredibly busy year. Obviously, in addition to being the sheriff, I'm also now the director of emergency services, which was official in January of this year. But it had kind of been.
Jeff, so that was never done that way before?
No, the Office of Emergency Services always fell under the county CEO's office, Jody Hayes. And nothing OES has really changed, but they've kind of transitioned from the CEO's office to the sheriff's office. And the driver for it is that almost any emergency in Stanislaus County will, to usually a greater or maybe to a lesser extent, involve law enforcement. We always have a role in it. And so it just makes sense that it ultimately falls under the sheriff's office. And actually OES, the team there, brings a lot to the sheriff's office. But then we also kind of bring the weight of the sheriff's office to them, because when something happens, when there's an emergency, they need people. And the sheriff's office has 800 employees. So we have a lot of folks that we can, push over there, at least for a short period of time, to really help run, emergencies, whether it's a wildfire, right? Clearly firefighters are the lead, but we have a big role in that. Floods, because evacuations fall under the sheriff's office. Hazmat, any kind of hazardous materials incident, technically by statute falls under the sheriff, even though I immediately turn to my friends in the fire service and say, help us out here, guys. But with COVID, that was a really, really busy year dealing with that. And we could go on about COVID itself for forever, and just the literally hourly changes that were coming out. No, we don't need to do this. No, now you have to do that. And well, tomorrow we were wrong about that. And we could have 2 shows dedicated to nothing about my frustrations with COVID. But then in the midst of that, the biggest wildfire in county history last July and August, and then kind of ongoing protests as well, which thankfully in our county were mild and professional compared to a lot of what you saw elsewhere. We had a couple of kind of events that went sideways, but for the most part, people did what the Constitution allows. They protested, and if they didn't, they went to jail.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they protest and not break anything,
Yep, absolutely.
That's your right to not. You don't have to agree with what's going on. That's what your right to protest or talk about other things. First Amendment, if I remember right.
Yep. But if you start looting, breaking, attacking, lighting things on fire, we're not putting up with that here. You'll go to jail.
All right. So now we brought this up on the radio about the $950 thing. That's huge, and where a lot of stores are closing in San Francisco, CVS and Walgreens and all that, because people are just ripping them off and going. You were talking about how you guys will definitely go after those people.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's just one of those commitments here where our role is law enforcement. It's illegal. We will will investigate, pursue, arrest, and ask the DA, who's very supportive, but ask her prosecute these people. We haven't seen that here, and yes, do we get shoplifting? We absolutely do. Tends to happen more in the cities than in the county itself. Where we see it at the sheriff's office is usually either in Patterson, one of our contract cities, or Riverbank, one of our other contract cities. Those are the 2 most common spots where we have to deal with it. Modesto PD, they see it more, Turlock, Ceres, etc. But most of that doesn't occur under our jurisdiction. But law enforcement in this county is, we are very homogenous and very in line with each other. We don't really have any divergent theories amongst myself or any of the chiefs, and so it really makes our relationship work very well, because we're pretty much all view things the same way.
And you guys all help each other out, right? I mean, a lot of people like, you can't pull me over because you're not Modesto PD. It's like, they can stop you and then get Modesto PD to come over.
Yep, absolutely. And there's a kind of a saying, we have the bear on our patch and on our badge, right? That the bear goes everywhere. So yep, we can go anywhere.
That's right. Remember that, people. They can go anywhere. All right. So COVID messed up a lot of stuff. They had the, prisoners out early, all that kind of stuff. You guys have dealt with the different things. You guys didn't have a major COVID outbreak in the jail system, which was.
We did. We had 3 outbreaks in the jail. So it wasn't that it didn't happen here, but we were one of the last of the bigger counties to get an outbreak in our jail. And then, the team over there just had a great plan to deal with it, just like we do really for any other kind of infectious disease or something transmissible like COVID. And so when we got it, I think the first outbreak was in November, early November, maybe late October. I think it was over about Thanksgiving time. And we viewed it as essentially the inevitable finally happened. But the team had a great plan in place. We had, of all the inmates that got sick, and I don't remember how many that was, one of them went to the hospital for a very brief stay. Most of them were either asymptomatic or, very, very mild symptoms. But the team did a great job of managing that, because it's going to happen. And then we had another one, I think, right after Christmas, and actually the third one just sort of ended up. But, we fully expect that, COVID it's ultimately going to be somewhat like the flu, and that I think you're just going to see COVID cycles come and go throughout, over the next few years for sure. That's not I make no claims of being an infectious disease, kind of person, but, in all the conversations that we have with Dr. V or, even like among state sheriffs and so on, that would generally be our expectation. It's going to be here for a while. And so we just have to learn how to deal with it.
All right. So taking over for Adam Christensen, right?
Yep.
There was a lot of stuff that was put in place. Have you made any changes in the sheriff's department since you took over?
Yeah, we have been very, very busy. That is for sure. Even in light of COVID, I'm proud of the team and the county board and everything that we've been able to accomplish. So I've had 5 major initiatives as the sheriff. The first one was recruiting and retention. As you know, 3 years ago we were authorized 180 deputies, and we normally that were filled to about 160. So we were 20 deputies down, and we would hire 10 and 8 would leave for another agency. We would hire 10, 7 would leave for another agency. So in a 5.5-year period, we hired 150 new deputy sheriffs to a net gain of 22. We went from 144 to like 165 at our peak. We could not retain staff. They would leave for higher paying agencies. So was the first thing that we had to solve, and I will claim that the team has done a great job of successfully fixing that problem. We did a few things with that. One, we got approval from the Board of Supervisors. We created a new classification called Deputy Sheriff 2 that came with 4 training requirements that we provided and 2 years of service. And when someone met both of those, then they automatically got a 10% raise. And once that kicked in, that actually went into effect. I was the sheriff-elect when I worked it out with the Board of Supervisors. It went into effect the Saturday before I was actually sworn in as sheriff. They approved it, I think, in December, so early January of 19. And since that time, we have lost 1 deputy to a lateral transfer to another agency.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's been incredible. So as of today, we are actually authorized 190 deputies. The county has given us more, and we currently have 181 on duty. I mean, they're not necessarily on duty, but are working. Right. And I'm talking about our ops deputies, not our custodial deputies that work in the jails. I'm talking about the ops staff, so the men and women, the deputies that you see out in the field, patrolling, detectives, et cetera. And we were at 183. We actually just released a couple that, for various reasons. And we have laterals in our background. We are finally, for the first time in years, we are getting laterals from other agencies that are transferring here to the sheriff's department. And so the pay had a huge portion of it, but also, our morale here right now is really strong. I think we have the best leadership team that I've seen in my 14 years at the sheriff's office. And, we are not perfect. You will never find an organization that is perfect, and we don't rest on our laurels, but we are doing great work with the recruiting and retention, because the more deputies that we have is the more, that's more that we can do for our community to keep it safe. So with that staff, we've restored community services, community deputies, right? So the deputies that kind of work hand in hand with some of the communities. So we started that back in 19. Before that, you hadn't seen a community deputy in 10 years. So that team is back with 8 deputies and a sergeant. We have 3 school resource officers that are on board right now with the County Office of Education that work in a lot of the county SCOE schools. So 3 deputies that are there. We have brought back detective positions that either didn't exist or were vacant for years. So we have a human trafficking detective, we have an arson detective, other additional gang and drug detectives. We filled positions there, additional homicide detectives. So that staff, just simply put, allows us to do more for the community. And I am 99.9% certain that the board is going to authorize another 5 deputies and a sergeant so that we can reopen the Salida substation in the next, hopefully about 6 months. And the target is April of next year. And Salida is the most underserved community in Stanislaus County by population. And so they will get their own whole team pushed back up there to help out the community of Salida. So recruiting and retention has been the number one initiative, and it's going well.
I saw a survey that said 80% of those polled believe that local law enforcement treats people like them with respect.
Yeah,
which is unusual. That's in our area, which is they don't have that in certain places. We'll just leave it at that. But
no,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And 70% trust law enforcement. 72, I think it was, or 73%.
And we were part of the agency that did that poll. I'm doing this thing called Project Resolve to address a lot of these issues that we see across the communities in our country. We want to prevent that here, but as a result of that, this idea of doing a poll to get local data was brought up and kind of agreed upon by the group. And the pollster who did the poll, we hired a nationally recognized firm to do it, and he said that, quite frankly, you don't see better polling numbers anywhere, for any type of entity, whether it's public safety, private industry, nonprofit, whatever the case may be. He said most things don't poll much better than, that mid 70s range. So he was quite impressed with the community support of law enforcement here in Stanislaus County. And
since you brought it up, what's Project Resolve?
For
people who don't know what that is.
Yeah, it is. Project Resolve is something that we brought together last July, actually, it started. And so after, the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis and some of the other incidents that kind of gained national attention, like so much stuff, it started with my wife and I having a conversation of, how can we address some of those challenges here and what needs to be done? She and I talked about it. So I reached out to a few other people and talked it over with them. And we created something that was ultimately named Project Resolve, because we resolved not to let those issues come up here, which doesn't mean there will never be some sort of a contested, law enforcement action that maybe was or was not appropriate. But we don't want to let something like that destroy our community. We want to have good relationships in advance so that people can learn, talk, get to, have a strong relationship to address them. So we started it last July. There were about 40 members from across the community that I reached out to, and I don't think anyone said no. I think there was one person who couldn't do it because of scheduling. But it was a great turnout, and we discussed a lot of hot topics. Law enforcement training, our internal affairs process, how we go through discipline, mental health, how we respond to mental health situations, and the pros and cons, why we have to do some things some ways, and why we can't do some things other ways based on law or whatnot. And so with that, at the end of it was originally supposed to be a 6-month process, which turned into a 12-month process. We came up with a few different things that we want to do. One was continue Project Resolve. We're actually in the process right now of reforming it into what I call PR 2.0. So we learned some things. We needed some other people at the table and so on. So keep that going. Go back to kind of like a community forum or town hall type meetings. We'll have the first one of those by the end of this year. Citizens academies, which happened years ago and kind of petered out, especially when the recession hit. They just died altogether. But where people can come and learn about not just how law enforcement does things, but then we can also learn from the community on how they would like to see some things happen. And then the Weed and Seed program, which was an old program. It's kind of where our community deputies came from. And, they would be very strongly associated with local communities, and they would weed out the problems, whether it's a group of criminals, a drug house. It could be something like homeless or trash dumps or whatever the case may be. Weed those problems out and then kind of seed the community with, maybe youth programs or healthcare, even, access to services and so on. So we want to restore that. And then we'll continue to wrestle with this idea of police oversight, citizen review boards, something like that, because it is a deep and complex topic, especially as it relates to the sheriff's office, because as an elected official, there is no elected official in our country that is subject to direct oversight by an appointed board. So there's some constitutional questions around that. There are sheriff's offices that have various types of review or whatnot. So yeah, a lot of it goes into, it's kind of like the devil's in the details. So we've got to wrestle with a lot of that stuff. So that's Project Resolve in a nutshell.
Thank you. I didn't read everything about it, but I took you away from your 5 things. You said your first thing is about hiring, and this is what you did. And then you said resolve, and I didn't want to lose my train of thought when you said it, because I'm old. It takes me a while to get back there.
Second major thing that we have done is kind of revamped our I call it professional development. It's not just training, although that's a major component of it. I prefer the term professional development because we're trying to get away from just hard training skills and look at how we can do things better, but also specifically leadership development, because good organizations have good leaders. And we have come up with a really sound leadership development kind of succession plan, right? So that if people want to promote, we can prepare them for that next rank, that next position. And then when they get it, they're ready to do the job on day one. So professional development, we have changed a lot there. We've added hours of training on an annual basis. We're in the process of still revamping some of that to where we can get into a more of a video type of system. We actually have just built a whole media studio here at the sheriff's office so that we can do regular videos. Just to get out consistent training bulletins on various things. But professional development has been the second major initiative, and we have really had some good progress on that. The third one was or is a strategic development plan. In fact, I'll hold it up. This is just a snapshot of it for anybody that's watching online. Let's see if I can get it in front of my camera there.
You're good.
But
can't read it though. Sorry.
What's that?
You can't read it, but we can see
That's
it.
okay. But the intention behind the strategic development plan was to identify 4 categories: infrastructure, so buildings, major pieces of equipment, like say our helicopter that we just got a new one of, programs, and personnel. The two typically go hand in hand, but looking to the future, what infrastructure, equipment, or programs and personnel do we need to replace, add, or maybe restore if they've gone away? Because we have several buildings across the county, some of which are newer, some of which are pretty old and desperately need to be remodeled or upgraded. We are running, because our staffing is so much better, we are literally running out of space at the sheriff's office. We keep turning little meeting areas into offices and so on, lobbies into meeting areas, and you get the picture. But we have to have a strategic plan. This is kind of like we talked about the military, like where are we going? Because we have a huge fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers that pay our salaries and pay for everything that we do. So I've got to give the Board of Supervisors a direction of where we're going and what, so that they can forecast the needs that are out there. Like say with the helicopter, it's taken me 2 years to get a new helicopter because they're expensive, right? The county's got to be able to plan for that. So that strategic development plan has given them that plan. So we have a good roadmap of where we're going. So that was the third initiative. The fourth initiative was wellness. Started off with this idea of getting more physically fit cops. We've all seen some pictures of cops across our country that are don't appear to be physically capable of doing their job.
You mean running after people?
Running, fighting, rescuing, whatever the case may be. So that's where it started initially. And then through a lot of conversations with members of the community, members of our staff, recognizing, and this also stems from my experience in Iraq, the emotional impact that this has on us. If you are involved in a major critical incident, a deputy deals with, a drowned baby. We see death regularly, weekly at least, whether it's just a natural death or something more tragic or more traumatic. There's a lot of emotional baggage. So all of that turned into kind of an overall wellness plan. And and my mantra is this: a healthy deputy, a well deputy, it's good for the deputy, it's good for this organization as an entity, and most importantly, it's good for our community, because that healthy deputy, when they're out there dealing with some sort of incident, because we often don't deal with people at their best, but if they're healthy, it allows them to deal with it in a healthier way, a better way. And so with that, we have implemented a number of things. The physical side is a lot easier to deal with than that mental or that emotional side. But so first, we have a CrossFit trainer that we contract with to provide, physical fitness training. We have a yoga instructor that can, work. We do yoga. It's all of this.
I'd like to see pictures of you doing yoga.
Cameras are forbidden, but honestly, it helps with your mobility. We have a nutritionist. Actually, we may be adding a second nutritionist as well. We have an athletic trainer, sort of like a physical therapist, right? We have a lot of folks that have, my X hurts, my Y hurts, and the athletic trainer will get in there and grind away on tight muscles or make them do certain exercises, try to help break down scar tissue or whatever it is that she does. And a lot of times when you go see her, you might leave crying, but it helps. And so that all of those have been very well received. And then through other programs, our peer support team, we bring in a couple of folks. One is a retired military guy with his wife, who is kind of a counselor, and they do an 8-hour block on how the brain works and responds to trauma and all of that so that people can work on the emotional side as well. And one of the key things with that too, and this is where I'm quite thankful for my experience in Iraq, is it's destigmatizing the fact that we have emotional trauma from the things that we see in this job. Cops like to be type A personalities, very angry, or not very angry, but very tough, right? And it doesn't affect me. Well, it does, because we're all human beings. So it's destigmatizing this idea of, if you're struggling, seeking help is perfectly fine. It's what you should do. And if you're not struggling, you might need to think that one through too, because when you see a dead child or something like that, that should bother you. But it's get the help that you need. So wellness has been a huge program here, and it's one of those things that morphs all the time, so that so we can accomplish or meet the needs of the team. But by doing that, we better serve our community.
You're putting into your people so they can put into the community. So exactly,
yep. Because a healthy employee is good for the community.
Yeah, because I'm sorry. I was going to say, I saw a lot of this with COVID, and my son up in Anchorage in the Army, they were stuck in barracks and they couldn't do anything. And there was a huge amount of mental issues that they were going through because they couldn't deal with it. And the Army's like, we're here to help you. Where prior to this, when I was in years ago, it was not something that you wanted to bring up.
Right? No, it was very much the idea of suck it up, and just keep doing what you're supposed to do. Right. Sometimes that may be appropriate, but a lot of times you need to have, create the environment for people to address whatever their underlying issue is. And then the final major initiative that we have really worked on is innovation. It's not just technology, although that is a significant part of it, because we are behind in some of our technology at the sheriff's office compared to other, kind of cutting edge law enforcement agencies across the country. Whether that's the ALPR, the automated license plate reading cameras, right? Hugely advantageous investigative tool. Sometimes the traffic cameras and so on that are at intersections, hugely valuable investigative tool. Lets us catch lots of criminals, right? Because we can kind of figure out where they're going, where they started, where they landed. We're behind on some of that. Our records management system is completely under evaluation right now, so we can get something that's newer and more efficient. But it's not just, like I said, the technology. Project Resolve is an example of an innovative program that we have started and are trying to build on to change how we do things to better serve the community. So that's more of a programmatic change. Honestly, the wellness is also an innovative thing. There are other agencies that do it, but locally, and this is not a knock on any of the other local agencies, I think that we have the strongest program, quite frankly, that I've heard of, which doesn't mean that there aren't better ones out there, but up and down the state somewhere, somebody I think might do it better. But that's an innovative program to make our team better, which we've already talked about. So there's a lot of stuff in innovation. We have, I call it the Fusion Center. We've never really settled on a name for it, but we created an entire new center that it's really our intelligence center, where they do investigative. They're all civilian analysts that work there. They do investigative support for detectives, for patrol, right? They dig into people's backgrounds, see if we can, connect this criminal with that criminal. And, like say, think of a drug dealers, right? We've got this guy. Who's he buy from? Who's he sell to, right? So that you can take out those nodes, right? If you can find and arrest those nodes, it does so much more for the community than just taking, users off the street. But the Fusion Center helps us with that. And, we see threats that come to our community from all over. It could be fire danger, right? They work at the Office of Emergency Services. So, stuff like fire threat, they all kind of collectively work on things like that. Protest, right? What groups might be coming to town? Many of them, 90% of them are nothing but protesters, right? Exercising their constitutional right. That's fine. But sometimes you get groups that want to show up that are, quite frankly, criminals, and they are simply here to do criminal activity. And we want to know about that in advance, so that we can have a proper response. So Fusion Center, we've had analysts in the past. We had, I think when I became sheriff, we had 2 or 3. I think we had 2. Now we have 5 full-time analysts. We have a data scientist and 3 part-time analysts. So we have really expanded that. They've kind of expanded like into our jails, so that, part of their duties are trying to figure out, gang activity in the jails. Where is it coming from? Where is it going to? How are we getting contraband into the jails? A lot of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of great information that comes out of our custodial setting, and that, allows us, again, to do more for the community by utilizing that information and acting on it. So that's just another example of innovation.
Right. Now, did you bring body cams in since
Yes.
you've been in there? Is that what you did?
We did that too. Sometimes I forget about all the stuff that we've gotten done, but we did. I had said early on, in my first campaign that, I fully supported body cams. We bring them in, and on April 1st of 2019, so January, February, March, so 3 months after I was sworn in as sheriff, we brought body cams in, and we've had them ever since. So the truth is, Ed, as I go back through some of my original campaign literature, and I look at that, and I think of all those things that I said I would do, I would say we've done everything that I said I would do. And I don't boast about that, right? Just to me, as a military guy, if I said I was going to do something, that's my expectation, simply that I do what I said I would do. And so I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm very appreciative of the support from our community and our board, that, because everything in this job comes down to resources, and resources almost invariably means money, and resources allow us to do more for the community.
And I think a lot of people don't realize what the sheriff department, the police department, what you guys do and what you really do. They only, not everybody believes what's on TV and on the news. We know that that's theirs, and you're going to have bad actors everywhere. Doctors, mortgage people, real estate agents, you name it, you're going to have them. The whole department is not bad for one person. So,
oh goodness, no.
Yeah.
Nope. And while we don't typically advertise it, just for a variety of reasons, we hold our team accountable too. I have held a lot of people accountable since I've been the sheriff. Many of them who were my friends, right? We all grew up together, if you will, in the sheriff's office. And, I kind of my mantra is that, Jeff doesn't want to do it, right? Some sort of accountability. As the sheriff, I have to do it because it's good for our community, right? Keeps their trust in us. It's good for the organization. And a lot of times at the end of it, it's ultimately good, though maybe painful for that individual as well. Accountability is not for me so much, it's for them, because we want them to be, better employees and better servants of the community.
Right. All right. So you gave us a lot of great information. A lot of people ask me, why are you going to have the sheriff on a real estate show? Well, you buy the community where you move into, and you're protecting our community. It's important to know what's going on. But what's probably the biggest challenge going forward for you guys?
I would say that the biggest issue that law enforcement collectively faces is mental health. It is the single biggest challenge that we see in a variety of factors. And now realize I am not a mental health professional, so I'm applying that term very, very broadly. But mental health manifests itself it could be in domestic violence. It could be in homelessness. It could be in addiction. A lot of this stuff, could be in gang activity, in you name it. Mental health manifests itself in so much of what we do. And, I talked a little bit earlier about innovation and how we respond to things, right? Well, we need to evaluate how we respond to things, specifically with mental health, and not just as law enforcement, though obviously we're a key part of it, but really as a community. And I say that because 50 years ago we used to have what we would have called insane asylums at the time, or maybe that even predates that, right? We wouldn't call that now. It's not very politically correct, but a lot of these folks with mental illness issues were locked up somewhere in some sort of state hospital. I think some of them probably inappropriately, which is what kind of wiped that out. But now when you drive down the street and you see that person arguing with a stop sign or fighting invisible dragons or whatnot, well, the truth is that's not good for that person. They don't want to do that. It's not good for our community. And my deputies don't want to have to deal with them because they're unstable, right? And arresting them, which is legally what we can do, even if we take them on a 5150 hold, which is not an arrest, it's just a temporary thing. But that's not the solution to the problem, right? We need kind of systemic solutions at the root cause. And some of these folks need to go to a facility where they can probably be, I'll say, locked up. That doesn't mean arrested, but committed, so that they can be treated the way they need to be treated to get better.
And I think that's one of the biggest problems, because then a lot of them don't want to be on the drugs or whatever they need to be treated because of some other, this, because of this and that. I think it's a struggle for us, no matter what industry you are there, it's in that community and what for us to deal with. But you were talking about people being institutionalized. That all changed during Reagan's time. And it wasn't just because he had to do it, it's because of what they pushed him to do.
Yes.
That they were illegal and other stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's a huge challenge. And I don't know how we answer that challenge.
Well, and I said earlier, everything comes down to resources, and you are talking probably billions upon billions of dollars to address just that issue alone in the state of California. Millions of dollars in Stanislaus County, and everything comes back to that. Ultimately, money can buy you programs, it can buy you staff to run those programs. If you need facilities to run those programs in, at the end of the day, almost everything comes down to money.
Right. It also comes down to people wanting to get help.
Yes, it does.
I'm not knocking what you're saying. I'm just saying You can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped.
Yep. But their conservatorship, you can go that route. I'm not really here to debate the merits of a conservatorship. That's kind of its own whole separate topic. I think there's certainly times when it's abused, and then I think there's also times when it's probably very appropriate. Mm-hmm. Where it's an involuntary process. But yeah, I mean, you can get someone committed that way, but to your point, and I agree with you completely, until they want to make a change, it's not going to happen. And we see that with the criminal element. Some of them are very successful in the programs that we offer. Something has happened in their life where they want to make that change and not do whatever got them there. Many of them don't. And it may be for mental health. It may be due to their upbringing, their circumstances, whatever. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah. On my other podcast, Edison, I interviewed Quan Nguyen, who he had murdered somebody and he was in 15 to life, and he changed his whole life around. He's actually out now, and he helps prisoners change their life and go through. And he never thought he was going to get out. They actually let him, but it's to that point where you say you can only do so much. You have to get that point where you don't want to be involved with that. And I told what you guys do in the sheriff's department, the police department. My hat's off to you. It's on my head, but you understand what I mean.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to put out there before we go? You did put a lot out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have your election coming up, which is 2022.
June, next June. And, I guess I would kind of end with this. We have done a lot, but there is still a lot left to do. And, so people, why are you running again? Well, that's why, because my work here is not yet finished. And, on all of those things that I've outlined, there's still we have made great strides, but the journey itself is not over. We can continue to restore more staffing to, our peak was a 210, 215 deputies back in 2007, right? We're authorized 190 right now. We've got to get back to where we were so we can do more for the community. And that takes a strategic plan. That takes professional development to, make sure that we have good, high quality deputies out there and good, high quality leadership to serve our community. We're not there yet. We've made great strides, but we need to keep pushing on that. And then, this innovation, we have a number of projects that I didn't even really speak to that are in the works. But, a lot of this stuff, they're multi-year projects, and I want to see it finished. And I think we're going to leave the sheriff's department in an even stronger spot than it's at today.
Great. And I really appreciate you coming on the show once a quarter to talk about what's going on. We didn't even get into the crime. We didn't get into all that other stuff. But I mean, overall, our community is in a really good shape. We talked about this before. And I think it's because you help out with the concealed weapons permits and that kind of stuff that, you'd have to be a dumb criminal to come to a county that has as many concealed weapons permits as we do.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, because just to protect, go to some other place that doesn't have it, San Diego or San Francisco or something like that.
Some place where law enforcement isn't going to come after you or the citizens aren't going to protect themselves.
Right. So stay out of our county.
Yep, absolutely.
We like this area. We want to keep it strong. So again, Sheriff, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Ed.
All right. I want to thank everybody for listening and watching. If you're watching this afterwards, just put a little comment, let us know. And again, thank you, Sheriff, for being on today.
Thanks, Ed.